Well, welcome back to the Mouse and Men, where we explore the grown-up side of Disney. I'm so excited I can't even speak. Find us online at themouseandmen.com, where you can find our top 10 things for grown-ups to do in Walt Disney World. Find links to all of our social media profiles. Find links to our YouTube channel as well, where we broadcast the podcast. And you can see our good-looking mugs. Me, Bradley, my co-caster, Chris. We're right there on the face of themouseandmen.com. So, Chris, how you doing today?
I am pumped. These are now becoming some of the favorite episodes that we do, when we take an existing piece of intellectual property or a ride or something, e-ticket attraction at Disney, and reimagineer it. And so we did it about a month or so ago for the Rock and Roller Coaster over in Hollywood Studios. And this week, we're diving into the Carousel of Progress in Tomorrowland in Magic Kingdom in Walt Disney World. So these are exciting just because it's like there's no wrong answers. It's just kind of dreaming up what we would miss, what we would like to see, what we'd like to see more of, and just dive into it. So this is going to be fun.
Yeah. So I will say for this episode, I've thought about Carousel of Progress, but I haven't completely fleshed out all my reimagineering ideas. So this is going to be on the fly. We'll see how this turns out. But without further ado, let's reimagineer the Carousel of Progress. So, Chris, last time you came up with 3 ways to reimagineer Rock and Roller Coaster. We're going to reimagineer Carousel of Progress in kind of the same way. Remind us those 3 ways that we're going to reimagineer today.
Sure. Okay. So this is an interesting way. I was putting some more thought into it today, and I figured that we'd come up with 3 ideas on this reimagineering. So the first idea is kind of like one for us. If we were Imagineers working at Disney, you're always kind of working under a budget. You got to make sure that like this is in line with what we have plans for the future. But we also have to balance out the monetary aspect with the new technological changes that we can incorporate in. And so it's kind of the one for us, the Imagineers, when we're trying to get it under the budgetary line. And so it's kind of just a facelift. It's not ripping out new walls. It's not like recreating or like, inventing the wheel, so to speak. It's just a facelift. That's one. And 2 is like one for them, the Disney nerds that are like, hey, we want something different, but we're still Disney. And so we need to do something with an intellectual property that is in the Disney brand. So a new recreating of an existing ride with a Disney IP. So that's point 2. And then the third is one for you and me, like as just like regular schmoes off the street that are talking about this, a completely new idea. And so it's kind of like one for us as Imagineers, one for them as the fans, and then one for you and me, the hosts of the Mouse and Men podcast. So that's kind of the 3 ideas. And we would love this game to be played at home. And so if you are listening or watching and are thinking about what you would do in any one of these 3 or all 3 categories, let us know in the comments or by reaching out to us on themouseandmen.com.
Yeah. So, Chris, I'll bring this up because I don't think we've talked about this since I got back. A couple weeks ago, I went to a wedding. Some friends were there and happened to meet some of the listeners of our podcast. And
sweet.
We were talking about the reimagineering of Rock and Roller Coaster. And one of them said he loves the idea of kind of going through California music. And your idea of being able to rotate some things in and out, but it just kind of goes through time with California music. So we kept that game going even just a couple weeks ago.
Awesome.
At the reception of a wedding. So with that being said, let's jump into that first topic of just reskinning, just updating some things. What's your idea, Chris?
Okay, so again, if budget was an issue, we had to make sure that we were staying into the constraints of what the people above us working for Disney, again, our imagination that we're using here, that we are Imagineers, and we're just going to give a facelift. I thought that it would be an interesting way to go, that stick with the same theme, but to update it a little bit in that, okay, so the Carousel of Progress is basically 6 different stops along the way. You get in to your seats when you begin, and that begins I think the prologue is what I've seen described in some places, and they describe what you're about to see. And then there's a 4-act play that happens, and the seats spin around these stages that are created, and so you have this.
They usually rotate around.
Yes,
we'll get
usually
to some of this later, but we have gotten stuck on this thing before.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes, and again, we will be bringing that up soon. So you go in stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, and those are like 4 acts. And then you have an epilogue that kind of wraps it up, and then you get off there in that area, and then you exit the ride. And so I thought here, the original ride appeared in 1964 in the New York World's Fair, and it started around the turn of the century. And so that was Act 1. And then Act 2 was the 1920s. Act 3 was the 1940s. And then in the time where it premiered at the New York City or the New York World's Fair, it stopped, or it ended the story in modern day, which would have been the 1960s or 1964. And so I thought that what we could do, because there have been updates to the Carousel of Progress over the years, that it's usually the turn of the century, the 20s, the 40s, and then it goes into in the 80s, it was more of like what we are like today. But then I think that in the 90s, they overlaid it again. And then it was kind of the future. And I think that they have had 2 things of like what the near future technology innovations in the house will look like. And so I thought, instead of all that, let's go back to the original ending point of like 1964, 1960s. And that's where it starts the new Carousel of Progress. So there is a continuation of the story being built. So the 1964 version will be Act 1, and then we'll skip ahead 20 years to the 80s, skip ahead another 20 years to the 2000s ish, and then we skip ahead to like where we currently are, what the future will look like. And so it really kind of keeps the concept of the past, the present, and the future sort of in there, but we just update it for a new audience. Because I mean, again, even what we are looking at in the future with the picture behind you, it looks very dated because it was done in the early 90s. But some of the technology is kind of legit to the way we are now. There are VR glasses. There is home automation where you just speak into the air and a computer does something for you. So there's really cool technology that they nailed. And so it would be cool to look what 20 years in the future would look like. So that's kind of my idea. Start where the other one ended, and then go up into kind of a modern day future.
Yeah, I agree. I think as far as reskinning, you could keep the turn of the century, the 20s, the 40s. It's just this last scene. And like you said, it was meant to be kind of a futuristic thing right on the edge of where technology is taking us. And currently, it feels like it did, maybe even as far back as the late 90s, but certainly early 2000s, the VR glasses, it's gotten a whole lot better. I know you're a fan of the, is it Google that makes the Oculus?
Facebook.
Facebook,
my kids and I had a conversation about that exact thing today. So Facebook Oculus.
Facebook makes the Oculus. It's just so much better than what they've got on display here. They've still got the big stereo system, which, I mean, stereo systems, your home theater doesn't look quite like that. They're still using bulkier laptops. So if you update the VR goggles, you get whether it's a partnership with Amazon and get Alexa in there, or you get a partnership with Google to get the Google Home thing going on. Who knows? Maybe you get something with Apple and get the Apple devices in there. But I'd like to see smart phones tablets in people's hands. And maybe everybody's just looking down at the screen the whole time, because that's kind of what we do in 2021. But I think just some of that could really bring this into the 2020s. I mean, technology is moving so fast. I don't know where we'll be in 2 years, let alone in 10 years. But something like that feels a little more up to date, and then your characters can talk about, we can control our home from the other side of the globe from our phone. In the future, we'll be able to do this and just kind of talk vaguely about it. But I think just reskinning that last scene, which is what Disney's been doing, you kind of get more of a gap between the 40s and where we are today. So I don't know, maybe you kind of space those things out a little bit. You start at the turn of the century, maybe then you move to kind of the late 30s, mid 40s, and then maybe the next one you're looking at the late 60s, early 70s. Maybe you kind of bridge the gap that way. But a lot of different ways. But I like your idea of the original final scene being that first scene, and then just kind of taking 20-year chunks along the way. I like it.
Yeah. Well, and again, it is kind of an interesting thing. If you look at the turn of the century, the 1900s turn of the century, all the way up to the 1960s, that was about a 60-year span. And now it's been from the 1960s until now, we're working on a 60-year span too. And so it seems like it'd be a good opportunity now, kind of in this point where it's been 60 years on since it's debuted, or I guess officially at the time of this recording, 57 years since it debuted at the World's Fair in New York City. So I think it would be a fun option. I love your idea, though, of, and I was trying to think of something earlier with the idea of sponsorships, because this came about in sponsorship with General Electric way back in the day. And so, but it hasn't had a sponsor in recent years. I think since 1985, GE has not been a member or a sponsor of the ride, although you can still spot GE appliances all over the place. But you're genius for thinking about how you can incorporate a modern day sponsor like what GE was 60 years ago. And it's absolutely an Apple or a Google or an Amazon, one of those three big, huge tech companies that deal in what this whole ride is about, like home automation and innovation.
Yeah. So
brilliant.
That's idea one. Idea two is bringing in some Disney intellectual property.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris, I want to ask this, like Hall of Presidents, like Rivers of America, heck, Big Thunder Mountain. These are things that are not based on pre-existing Disney IP.
Oh, okay. I see where you're going. Yes.
Is this, I mean, Hall of Presidents, how do you really bring in Disney IP into president history? So we may be getting into territory of this doesn't get touched by Disney IP, but what's your idea? Where would you go? How would you incorporate Disney IP into Carousel of Progress?
And see, that brings up a really good point, because I think it's something that you just hit on was the idea that something like the Hall of Presidents and the Carousel of Progress, some of these probably considered by most in today's standards a more dated Disney experience inside the parks. Part of the reason why I think that they have such staying power or have stuck around so long is because Walt Disney himself had hands in designing some of these iconic things like the Hall of Presidents or the Carousel of Progress. And so the idea of keeping some of these around because it honors Walt's legacy, that was something that I bumped up against. It was easy to reimagine the Rock and Roller Coaster because I personally don't have any touch points with the Imagineers that came up with those rides. But something like Carousel of Progress, it's kind of the sacred ground that we're treading on by thinking about doing this. On top of that, I was just watching a history of the Carousel of Progress today. And Marty Sklar, the late Marty Sklar, who worked alongside Disney for a lot of the rides and innovations that we see, he had his hand in building this in all the iterations leading up to where we are now, too. So now taking away even just the end scene or redesigning the whole, like reskinning it, is taking away his legacy. And so I think actually I watched the video right over your left shoulder. She's got a whiteboard up against the wall there. And there's something on there that said Marty wants to change something to that degree. And that's a nod to Marty Sklar working on the Carousel of Progress. So just a shout out there. So it's difficult to do. Having said that, in playing our game, I wanted to just be bold, even if I'm going against Walts Legacy and Marty Sklar. And I thought, we're in Tomorrowland. And so if we're going to be smart Imagineers, we need to retheme something in the theme of space, future, Tomorrowland, and kind of where we're hoping to go into the future. One of the pieces of Disney intellectual property that speaks the future to me is WALL-E. And so one of the ideas that WALL-E has, or the kind of the theme in the movie, is like all of this innovation, all of this technology is great. But if we, as humans, don't harness it in the right way, we can have some negative effects moving forward as a species. And so I thought, what if WALL-E and Eve come to the Carousel of Progress to kind of teach us, and especially at Epcot or something like that, you're going to learn, you're going to have the edutainment side of all of this as well. So in this, WALL-E and Eve take us through the 4-act structure, so we keep the bones the same, of how we can use technology and innovation, but how we can I would say something like embracing technology but remaining human, and still excelling as humans. And so using technology to make us stronger, to make us better, to make us more communicative across the world. And so I thought Act 1 could be how technology affects me. And so then we're talking about technology and all the ways that it makes life better, but then how it can prolong our lives and make us better in that way. So we can be more entertained and have fun with all of it, but we can also utilize it to just be better humans. And so Act 2 would then go to how does technology and the innovations therein help us as a community, like my family, the people that I see on an everyday basis. And because of the way that technology is, maybe they're like our friends, our listeners up there in the New England area. Maybe there are people across the world that we can communicate with through all these social media things that we have. And so how can we have the community that we stay in touch with? And then the third act could be, what about the world? Like, how can we use technology to help the world? So again, this edutainment thing, but then the final act will be the future, our future generations. How can we use that to not only impact and make us happy in the present, but can impact the future of humanity so that we can continue to expand and excel as a species? So my Disney IP idea is to incorporate WALL-E and Eve in embracing technology, but remaining or growing as humans, progressing as humans.
I love it. And you could, because WALL-E and Eve don't speak a whole lot, you could have the captain of the ship, and I can't remember the name of the ship in WALL-E, but he could be the narrator.
That is a very good point that I failed to look at, is the fact that they barely talk. They mostly do sounds and kind of emotional sounds, but they don't do a lot of talking. So we would need a third character that maybe goes on this adventure with them.
But I could see that being just absolutely brilliant. So my thought, and this IP has been used in other parks around the globe, but I don't know that it has anything, any representation in the U.S. parks. And that is Big Hero 6.
Oh, yes.
So just like Carousel of Progress currently goes through the progression of technology since the turn of the century, Big Hero 6, or the Big Hero 6 characters, Baymax and Hero, could take us through the history of medicine. And it could start around turn of the century, or it could start earlier, it could start later, whatever. But that last scene can get into the future of medicine where, like 3D printing bones to help repair things. Like instead of a knee replacement surgery and using this stuff that's, I don't know where it's manufactured, but now you can 3D print it, which means you can have it faster. They're 3D printing cars. They're 3D printing everything these days. But that would be kind of a cool end scene of where medicine is going next.
I love that. That's incredible.
I think Big Hero 6 is an underrated movie. So I'd love to see that have some space, some representation in the parks. And I think Carousel of Progress would be a great place.
That's wonderful. And I agree with you. Actually, Big Hero 6 is one of the few Disney movies that I've seen with my kids multiple times in the theater. I think that we saw it twice or three times. I think twice with my son, and then my son and I took our daughter to see it a third time. And so love Baymax and all the characters in Big Hero 6. That's a great idea.
Yeah. So the final Reimagineering, it's just going buck wild and creating something completely new from scratch. Chris, where are you going with that?
Okay, so the more buck wild I tried to get with Carousel of Progress, the more I kept coming back to like what makes the Carousel of Progress so special in the first place. And if it wasn't there, what I would miss. And so the Carousel of Progress does a really good job of taking me, a person in 2021, back to what it was like in the turn of the century. I guess, well, more specifically, America turn of the century and all the innovations in the home, and then the 40s and the 60s, and then on from there. And so it's always done a good job of taking me back. But I thought that instead of going like completely bonkers and demolishing the whole thing and then starting from scratch, I kind of like this idea of this, like what was brand new, cool technology of this carousel that Walt put in the World's Fair. Pardon me. I was about to say the World Trade Center, and I couldn't think of the World's Fair. So he did all this stuff. Like, I didn't want to get rid of it. I kind of wanted to still honor Walt and all of that innovation that happened way back then. But instead of talking about the past in decades past, I would love to go decades in the future and talk about the Carousel of Progress of what we will become. And Disney, and some of the things, if we're looking at Carousel of Progress or maybe Spaceship Earth, you look at some of the things that they're saying about the future, and it's kind of funny in a kitschy way that the fact that, these people right here, they do have VR glasses, but they look very dated, and all the, the graphics on the TV screen when they do the on the ride are very dated as well.
I mean,
and so
look at this laptop. Look at the border around that screen on that laptop. You got 2 inches all the way around. When was the last time you saw a laptop with that thick of a border around the screen?
Yeah. And I'm looking also on the oven over your left shoulder again. The red digital timer is a very 90s alarm clock digital readout with the red lettering. So yeah,
my parents have a brand new oven, and I mean the whole top of it is some sort of LED thing.
Yeah.
In it, I mean, it sounds like a video game starting up when you preheat it. I don't know. I mean, it kind of sounds like it's got theme music when it's ready to go or something. I don't know.
Yeah. But you know what? One thing they did get right. And again, some of this technology is close, even though it looks a little different these days. But that I was noticing, and maybe I'm nerding out on architecture, but I know that you are a fan of architecture, especially when like talking about you and your dad and that legacy. So just talking about this completely open concept for this big, huge living room / dining room / office / kitchen area, which is
bathroom off the side where Uncle Orville is not getting any privacy.
Oh, cousin / Uncle Orville. So the open concept, though, I thought was pretty ahead of its time for the early 90s, late 80s when they designed this, because it is much open than the rest of the ride even.
Yeah, I agree. I
got off track of where I was.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I don't know if you got to what's your complete, I guess it's looking at present day, decade in the future, 2 decades in the future, 3 decades in the future kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. So it's instead of looking at the past in the Carousel of Progress, let's look and see how we will, as a species, increase in technology and innovation and home automation into the future. And so, yes, starts off present day, and then it moves on. What I first was going to do, like, what would it look like 100 years from now, and then 500 years from now, and then 1,000 years from now? And then I thought, no, that's a little too, like, I don't know if you can kind of conceptualize 1,000 years from now sort of thing. So instead of that, I thought, what if that was 50 years and then 100 years and then 200 years? And then I thought, still, that's kind of too big. And so I came up with present day, and then 10 years out, and then 20 years out, and then 50 years out. So it's not so much of a leap.
Yeah.
But we as people watching this we'll catch up to it eventually, because if history is any storyteller in the Carousel of Progress, it's been about 25 years that scene behind you has been there. So people will know if we got it right in 2021 about what it will look like 25 years in the future and 10 years in the future. So it'd just be interesting to shorten the time frame so that it's not such a big leap for our brains to have to think of, like, we don't even eat food anymore 1,000 years from now, and we just communicate telepathically 1,000 years from now. That may be too big of a leap, but 10 years, 25 years, and 50 years, I think, is a reasonable amount of time to go to the future.
Well, I mean, some people are saying that with this COVID vaccine that, 5G and all this stuff, I can probably just text you from my brain now. Not even have to use the phone. But that would be really cool, especially what do you think it's going to be like 50 years in the future? Because, I mean, that's what we were going through with the Jetsons. I mean, I know it's a cartoon, but we had this robotic maid. We had flying cars. We all lived in space. And they were kind of thinking 50 years into the future. So that would be, I mean, I know the Imagineers would have a fun time trying to think through all of that.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? I'm redoing it yet again.
Yeah.
Since this kind of leaves off and where we're at, I want to do the future still, but in the same increments that the original Carousel of Progress went in the past. So
Gotcha.
20-year,
20s,
like a generation in between. So that's where my final answer there.
So my thought has originated probably since we got to this third Reimagineering. It's the one that I didn't think about beforehand. So it may have some gaps, and I apologize, but one thing on Disney Plus that everybody seems to love is the Imagineering Story. And we've got 4 acts, and Walt Disney World has 4 parks. So each act is a very brief, and maybe it becomes a longer show, a very brief Imagineering story for each park. And so it can just kind of highlight one thing, Animal Kingdom can highlight, well, let's go in order of opening. Magic Kingdom can talk about, where it started to now the new trackless runaway railway. It can talk about that. Then you go over to Epcot and you can talk about bringing all these countries together, but you can also talk about this new area that they're building in front of World Showcase. I mean, they're really just reimagining the whole half of the park. Then you go to Hollywood Studios and you've got the Imagineering that went into Galaxy's Edge. And then finally, Animal Kingdom, you've got if you've watched The Magic of Disney's Animal Kingdom on Disney Plus, there is a lot of Imagineering that went into that safari alone to divide up the animals so that you don't have the lions attacking giraffe and zebra in the middle of your tour. And, now you've got your young kids asking, okay, why is that lion just going to town on that zebra? There's a lot there, but also the new Avatar area of the park with Flight of Passage, with the new audio animatronics that they've been using, all that kind of thing. So you can view the Imagineering of each park. I think that would be kind of a cool thing. Like
That'd
I
be
said,
great.
it would be a little bit longer of a show, I think, because right now you stop for just 5 or 6 minutes in each act. And so it's a 20, maybe 30-minute ride. It may be stretched out to a little bit longer with something with Imagineering, but I think it could be really cool.
Dude, I think that's an amazing idea. And so I think that even with that, you don't even change anything, even with the title, except for you add one world. Right now, I believe it's called Walt Disney's Carousel of Progress. And then if you just change it to Walt Disney World's Carousel of Progress, it's like, I think that's brilliant. And that really meets the nerd in me that loves the Imagineering. That was one of my favorite offerings that Disney Plus has put out in the last year or so. I think that's a great idea.
I think I'm watching it for the third time right now. Just kind of putting it on in the background when I need something to watch. But
hey, on the fly, great job.
I mean,
well done, sir.
It can kind of fit into Tomorrowland because they're always pushing the boundaries of what technology can do in Imagineering. And they pushed they pushed the boundaries when Disneyland first opened. They pushed the boundaries again when they acquired all this land in Orlando. It was just a stopping point along the interstate as people were going to Miami and the Keys. That's why they picked it. It was just along the route. Like, what if we can detour some people for a couple days as they go down or they go back up? So all this forward thinking really just played into these theme parks. I think it could work.
Man, I love this. And again, you win your gold star for your Imagineer job, because that was great. And if there are other Imagineers that are out there listening to this and you want to use one of these ideas, just reach out to us. We're easy to get in touch with. We'll be more than happy to lend a hand to just I'll take a fake shirt that says Imagineer on it and you can tell me it's real. That's all I do.
Look, it doesn't cost you much at all to give me and my family lifetime passes.
It's research, really.
I'll pay for food if I have to. I mean, I'll take a free dining plan. Not that they have them, but nice. Give me some platinum card where I just, walk in, I can swipe it for, go to Brown's Diner or not Brown's Diner. Brown's Diner is a place here in Nashville.
The Brown Derby.
Yes. The Brown Derby, and, get as many cheeseburgers as I want. Just swipe the card. You're good. I like this. It's like tips. That's fine. And
I think that would be appropriate. We should give back in the way that we can, having won the Disney lottery and having all these freebies at our disposal.
Exactly. So that is how we would reimagineer Carousel of Progress. So now it's time for our segment called Plussing.
Plussing.
So, Chris, this isn't the first time we've talked about Carousel of Progress on this show.
No, it's not. Actually, back in episode 42, you can go back and listen to you and I talk about a work trip that we took to Walt Disney World. The first time that you and I went to Disney World together, and it was because we worked with the same company and they had a conference or a convention down there. But we had a mishap on the Carousel of Progress.
Yes, we got stuck, and I don't remember which scene it was because it was probably 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. Don't remember much, but the two of us and our coworker Hannah, who was mad that she wasn't mentioned in this. We mentioned her in the podcast. That podcast was found on YouTube by Inside the Magic, a website covering all things Disney.
InsideTheMagic.net.
Yeah, they wrote an article about us freaking out, which we did do on Carousel of Progress because it got stuck. Hannah was there with us. So the three of us are there. Inside the Magic sees that episode on YouTube, writes an article and publishes it. So We'll link to it in the show notes. We'll link to it in this description down below here on YouTube. Go check it out. We were quite surprised to find that we were I don't know.
The subject of an article there. Yeah.
Yeah. So some people couldn't understand why we were freaking out. I mean, I get it. I don't know why I was freaking out on Carousel of Progress. It had been a long day. Look, when you've been up at that point for 20 some odd hours, I guess.
Yeah, we were a little slap happy, to say the least, that night.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have to deal with kids that day, at least not my own. But just having to work 3/4 of a day, then run, change clothes, and hitting the park. And we'd been in the park already for what would that be? Like 8-10 hours? If we got in there at 4, 10 hours. So
woof.
Yeah, working a double shift to say the least.
Well, shout out to InsideTheMagic.net.
Go check out that article.
It was posted on May 5th, 2021. Shout out to Lisa who wrote it. And it's called Guest Stuck on Carousel of Progress at 2 a.m. Hilariously Panic. That's the title of the blog post. We were just so thrilled, Bradley, when you sent me that article. I was just waking up and I was like, what? We're mentioning an article? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
We're famous.
Yeah. All of a sudden we got some extra hits on YouTube. I'm like, where are these coming from? Thinking we've been scammed and they're going to shut down our YouTube account. And then I look Inside the Magic. I was like, what? So searched Inside the Magic for Bradley and Chris, and there we were. So I want to say thank you, Inside the Magic, for that article. We're glad we could entertain you with our stories of getting stuck of all things Carousel of Progress. So check that out in the description below. But also go check out themouseandmen.com, where you can find our top 10 things for grown-ups to do in Walt Disney World. And if my in-laws are listening to this, they were asking about some things that they could do. Even just some of them taking a girls trip or taking a couples trip, and what could the guys do while the girls were going to do this other stuff.
Oh yeah.
Check out that top 10 things for grown-ups to do. While you're there, go check out our social media pages as well. Be sure to follow those. You can find us on YouTube, where we broadcast the podcast. And I love these Reimagineering episodes because we get to put on a fun hat of just being creative and going buck wild. If you could do anything, what would you do? It's just like being a kid out in the backyard on the swing set, pretending it's a pirate ship. It's just a reminder that you don't want to grow up too fast.
But you got to keep exploring.
You need an uplight.
Yeah, I do.
Because it's your hat. Yeah, there you go. Go all volleyball on us.
I'm Spike Lee.
I was kind of hoping that you would be able to come on and only talk with half of your mouth.
Welcome to the Mouse and Men Guide, where I'm doing an impression of Bill Murray in Caddyshack for the whole episode.
Welcome to the Mouse and Men, where we explore the grown-up side of Disney. Also, did you hear who the Titans just acquired?
Julio!
But the thing that I want to know, what's his name from Ole Miss? AJ Brown is number 11. Is he going to give up his number to Julio?
That's a good question.
I watched a ride through.
Me too.
Earlier today, and that's about all I've done as far as prep.
Dude, that was fun, man.